The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop in front of the Columbus, New Mexico station, and Olivia Sinclair stumbled out into the bitter February wind of 1885 with hands so numb she could barely feel them anymore. She had been traveling for 6 days straight from Boston, and the last leg of the journey through an unexpected blizzard that had swept down from the mountains had left her fingers purple and swollen beneath her thin cotton gloves. The conductor had to help her down because she could not grip the handle, and when her feet touched the frozen ground, she nearly collapsed from exhaustion and cold. Quinn Vance was supposed to be waiting at the station, but all Olivia could see through the swirling snow was a crude wooden building with a crooked sign that read, Columbus Station. Her trunk hit the ground with a thud behind her, and the stagecoach driver muttered something about fool women traveling in winter before climbing back up to his seat. The horses stamped impatiently, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air, and then they were gone, leaving her alone in what felt like the end of the world. She tried to pick up her trunk, but her hands would not cooperate. The fingers would not bend, would not close around the leather handle. Panic seized her chest because she had come all this way to marry a man she had never met, and now she stood in the freezing cold, unable to even carry her own belongings. Tears stung her eyes, freezing on her lashes, and she wondered if she had made the worst mistake of her life. Miss Sinclair. The voice came from behind her, deep and rough like gravel. She turned to see a tall man emerging from the station building, his broad shoulders covered by a heavy sheepskin coat. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the wind, and his boots crunched through the snow as he approached. "I am Quinn Vance." Olivia tried to curtsy, tried to extend her hand in greeting, but all she could manage was a shaky nod. Her whole body trembled violently now, the cold having seeped so deep into her bones that she could not control the shaking. "Mr. Vance," she managed through chattering teeth, "I apologize for my appearance. The journey was more difficult than expected." He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing as he took in her condition. They were gray eyes, she noticed, the color of storm clouds, and they held a sharpness that suggested he missed nothing. His face was weathered and tanned, with a strong jaw covered in dark stubble, and a scar ran through his left eyebrow. He looked to be about 26 or 27, perhaps a few years older than her own 22 years. "How long have you been in the cold?" he asked, his gaze dropping to her hands, which hung uselessly at her sides. "Since yesterday morning. The stagecoach got caught in the blizzard north of here. We had to keep moving because stopping would have been worse." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears, hollow. Quinn's expression darkened. "Let me see your hands." She held them out, and even through the gloves, he could see the unnatural color. Without hesitation, he pulled off his own thick leather gloves and began gently removing hers. Olivia gasped at the sight of her own fingers, so swollen and discolored that they barely looked human. The skin had turned a mottled purple and white, and blisters had formed on several fingertips. "Jesus," Quinn breathed. Then, without another word, he took both of her hands between his own and pressed them against his chest, tucking them inside his coat. His hands were large and calloused, rough from years of ranch work, but they radiated warmth like a furnace. Olivia felt the heat seeping into her frozen flesh, and it hurt so badly that she cried out. "I know it hurts," he said quietly, his voice steady and reassuring. "But we need to warm them slowly. If we do it too fast, you will lose the fingers. Can you stand a little longer?" she nodded, biting her lip against the pain. Standing this close to him, she could smell leather and wood smoke, could feel the solid strength of his body. It was strangely intimate, this unexpected closeness with a stranger, but she was too desperate for warmth to feel embarrassed. He kept her hands pressed between his own, occasionally rubbing them gently, his breath warm against her forehead. "My wagon is just over there," he said after a moment. "I have blankets and a heated stone. Once we get you inside and warmed up properly, we will see about getting the doctor." "Is there a doctor in Columbus?" Olivia asked weakly. "Doc Harrison. He is old and drinks too much, but he knows his business." Quinn shifted his grip on her hands, bringing them closer to his neck where his skin was warmest. The gesture was careful, almost tender. "Can you walk?" "I think so." He released one of her hands long enough to grab her trunk with his free arm, lifting it as though it weighed nothing, then recaptured her hand between his own. Together they made their way across the snowy street to where a sturdy wagon waited, hitched to two large draft horses. Quinn set down the trunk and helped Olivia up onto the seat, then wrapped her in several heavy wool blankets. He retrieved a stone wrapped in cloth from beneath the seat, still warm from the fire, and placed it in her lap. "Keep your hands on that," he instructed. "Not too tight, just rest them on the cloth." He climbed up beside her and took the reins, guiding the horses down the main street of Columbus. The town was small, just a collection of buildings clustered together against the harsh landscape. A general store, a saloon, a church with a crooked steeple, and perhaps a dozen houses scattered along the rutted road. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks white with snow, and the wind howled across the open plains with nothing to stop it. "It is not much to look at," Quinn said, as if reading her thoughts. "But it is home." Olivia wanted to respond, wanted to say something polite and agreeable, but the pain in her hands had intensified as the circulation began to return. She focused on breathing through it, on not crying out with every jolt of the wagon. Quinn glanced at her several times, his expression unreadable, but he did not press her to talk. They stopped in front of a small wooden house with a sign that read J. Harrison, physician. Quinn tied off the reins and came around to help Olivia down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit the ground, but he caught her around the waist, steadying her. For a moment they stood there, his arm supporting her weight, their faces close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. "I have got you," he said quietly. The door opened before they could knock, and an older man with wild white hair and spectacles peered out at them. "Quinn Vance, what brings you to town in this weather? And who is this young lady?" "This is Olivia Sinclair. She came in on the stage with frostbite on her hands. Can you help her, Doc?" Doc Harrison's expression sobered immediately. He ushered them inside, where a fire crackled in a potbelly stove, filling the room with blessed warmth. The office was cluttered with medical books and bottles of various medicines, but it was clean and smelled of carbolic soap. "Let me see them, dear," the doctor said gently, pulling up a chair for Olivia near the fire. She unwrapped her hands from the blankets and held them out. The doctor examined them carefully, probing the swollen flesh with gentle fingers. He asked her questions about when the freezing had started, how long she had been exposed, whether she could feel anything. Quinn stood nearby, his hat in his hands, watching with an intensity that surprised Olivia. "You have got yourself a bad case here," Doc Harrison said finally. "But I think we caught it in time. The fact that you can feel pain is a good sign. We need to keep warming them gradually, and I will give you some salve to prevent infection. You will need to keep them bandaged and avoid using them for at least a week, maybe 2. "A week." Olivia's voice rose in dismay. "But I am supposed to help with the household. Mr. Vance sent for a bride who could work, and I cannot even hold a spoon." Quinn stepped forward. "You are supposed to be my wife, not my servant. The work can wait until you are healed." Something in his tone made Olivia look up at him sharply. His jaw was set in a stubborn line, and there was a protectiveness in his eyes that she had not expected. They had exchanged only a handful of letters over the past 3 months, practical letters discussing the arrangement, the journey, what would be expected. He had seemed like a practical man seeking a practical solution to loneliness, not someone who would show concern for a stranger's injured hands. Doc Harrison prepared a basin of lukewarm water and had Olivia soak her hands while he mixed together a salve that smelled strongly of camphor and something else she could not identify. The soaking hurt terribly at first, then gradually the pain subsided to a dull throb. When the doctor finally bandaged her hands in clean white cloth, they looked like two useless clubs at the ends of her arms. "No heavy work for at least 2 weeks," Doc Harrison repeated firmly. "And come back in 3 days so I can check on them. If you see any red streaks or if they start to smell bad, you come immediately. Understand?" Olivia nodded, fighting back tears of frustration and exhaustion. She had come all this way to start a new life, to escape the suffocating confines of her aunt's house in Boston. And now she arrived as a burden rather than a help. Quinn paid the doctor and helped Olivia back out to the wagon. The snow had stopped falling, but the wind still cut through her layers of clothing like knives. He lifted her up onto the seat with the same careful strength he had shown before, then climbed up beside her and wrapped the blankets around her again. "My ranch is about 5 miles outside of town," he said as they started moving. "It is not fancy, but it is solid. I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen. She is a widow from China who needed work, and I needed help keeping the place clean. She does not speak much English, but she is kind." "I did not expect you to have help already," Olivia said quietly. "I did not expect my bride to arrive half frozen," Quinn replied, but there was no accusation in his tone. Life does not always go according to plan. They rode in silence for a while, the wagon creaking and swaying over the rough road. The landscape was stark and beautiful in its own way, all white snow and brown earth stretching to the horizon. Olivia had grown up in the crowded streets of Boston, where buildings blocked the sky and people pressed in from all sides. This emptiness was overwhelming and terrifying and strangely exhilarating all at once. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Go ahead." "Why did you send for a mail-order bride? A man like you with a ranch and property, surely you could have found a wife here." Quinn was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "There are not many women in Columbus," he said at last. "The few that are here are either married or too young. I tried courting a girl from the neighboring ranch 2 years ago, but she decided she wanted city life instead. Went to El Paso and married a merchant. After that, I figured it was easier to be honest about what I was looking for from the start." "And what are you looking for?" He glanced at her then, really looked at her, and Olivia felt something flutter in her chest. "Someone steady," he said. "Someone who wants to build something lasting. I am not interested in romance or poetry. I want a partner, someone who will work beside me and maybe give me children someday. I thought I made that clear in my letters." "You did," Olivia agreed. "That is why I answered your advertisement. I wanted honesty, not false promises." She had her own reasons for leaving Boston, reasons she had not fully explained in her letters. Her parents had died when she was 16, leaving her to the care of an aunt who saw her as free labor and a mouth to feed. When Olivia turned 22, her aunt had begun pressuring her to marry a widower nearly 40 years her senior, a friend of the family with 3 unruly children and a reputation for meanness. The thought of that life had been unbearable. Quinn's advertisement had appeared in the Boston newspaper like a lifeline. He had been blunt about his circumstances, had not tried to paint a romantic picture or make false promises. He needed a wife. She needed an escape, It had seemed like a fair exchange. But now, sitting beside him with her bandaged hands and her uncertain future, Olivia wondered what she had really gotten herself into. The ranch appeared on the horizon as the sun began to set, painting the snow pink and gold. It was a modest spread with a sturdy two-story house, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals that currently held about a dozen horses. Smoke rose from the chimney, promising warmth and shelter. A small woman emerged from the house as they pulled up, her dark hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a simple dress and a thick shawl, and her weathered face broke into a smile when she saw Quinn. "Mr. Quinn," she called out in heavily accented English. "You bring wife home." "This is Miss Sinclair," Quinn confirmed. "Olivia, this is Mrs. Chen." Mrs. Chen's smile faded when she saw Olivia's condition. She immediately began speaking rapidly in Chinese, gesturing toward the house and then at Olivia's bandaged hands. Quinn answered her in what sounded like passable Chinese, which surprised Olivia considerably. "You speak Chinese?" she asked. "Enough to get by. Mrs. Chen has been teaching me." He lifted Olivia down from the wagon, and Mrs. Chen hurried forward to take her arm, supporting her on the other side. Together they helped her into the house, which was warm and smelled of cooking food. The main room had a large stone fireplace with a fire crackling in it, comfortable furniture that looked handmade but well-crafted, and windows with real glass panes. Stairs led up to a second floor, and Olivia could see a kitchen through a doorway to the right. Mrs. Chen guided her to a chair by the fire and immediately began fussing over her, bringing a footstool and more blankets. She disappeared into the kitchen and returned moments later with a cup of hot tea, which she held to Olivia's lips since Olivia could not hold it herself. "Mrs. Chen makes the best tea in New Mexico," Quinn said, removing his coat and hat. "She has a garden where she grows herbs. Half of them I cannot pronounce, but they taste good." The tea was indeed delicious, warming Olivia from the inside out. She leaned back in the chair, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion. Her eyes drifted closed and she heard Quinn and Mrs. Chen speaking in low voices, a mixture of English and Chinese. "Stay awake a little longer," Quinn said, crouching down beside her chair. "You need to eat something before you sleep, and we should get you into dry clothes." "I cannot undress myself," Olivia said, the reality of her helplessness hitting her anew. "Mrs. Chen will help you. I brought your trunk in. It is upstairs in your room." "My room?" She opened her eyes to look at him. "Not our room." Quinn's expression became carefully neutral. "I thought, given the circumstances, you might prefer your own space until you are more recovered, and until we are actually married. The wedding can wait until you are feeling better." Relief flooded through her, though she tried not to show it too obviously. She had been dreading the wedding night, the intimacy with a stranger, even though she knew it was part of the arrangement. "Thank you," she said softly. "That is very considerate." Something flickered in his eyes, but he only nodded and stood up. "Mrs. Chen will take care of you. I need to see to the horses and check on the stock. I will be back in about an hour." He left through the front door, letting in a blast of cold air before closing it firmly behind him. Mrs. Chen watched him go, then looked at Olivia with an expression that might have been approval. "Good man," she said firmly. "Very good man." Olivia was beginning to believe that might be true. Mrs. Chen helped Olivia upstairs to a small but comfortable bedroom with a real bed covered in quilts, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the corrals. She unpacked Olivia's trunk and found a nightgown, then helped her out of her travel-stained dress and into the clean, soft fabric. It was humiliating to be dressed like a child, but Mrs. Chen was gentle and matter-of-fact about it, never making Olivia feel worse than she already did. Downstairs again, Mrs. Chen served her a bowl of stew thick with vegetables and chunks of beef. She had to be fed like an infant, which made her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but the food was so good and she was so hungry that she soon forgot her pride. When the bowl was empty, Mrs. Chen brought her back upstairs and tucked her into bed with the same efficient kindness. "Sleep now," Mrs. Chen said. "Everything better in morning." But as Olivia lay in the darkness, listening to the wind howl outside the window, she was not sure anything would be better in the morning. She was trapped in a strange place with a strange man, unable to even feed herself or tie her own shoes. She had gambled everything on this journey, and now she did not know if she had made a terrible mistake. She must have fallen asleep eventually, because she woke to gray morning light filtering through the window and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. Her hands throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, and when she tried to sit up, she realized how difficult even the simplest tasks would be without the use of her fingers. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway as if she had been listening for movement. She helped Olivia dress in a simple cotton dress and braided her long brown hair, then assisted her downstairs. Quinn was already at the kitchen table, eating eggs and bacon. He stood when she entered, pulling out a chair for her. "How do you feel this morning?" he asked. "Like an invalid," Olivia said honestly. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Doc Harrison said 2 weeks. You will be back to normal soon enough." Mrs. Chen served her breakfast and once again had to help her eat. Quinn watched for a moment, then seemed to realize that his presence was making her uncomfortable. He finished his own meal quickly and stood. "I have work to do outside. If you need anything, Mrs. Chen will help you. She's going to make more of that salve Doc Harrison recommended. We have most of the herbs in her garden." After he left, the house felt very quiet. Mrs. Chen cleaned up the breakfast dishes, humming to herself, while Olivia sat by the fire feeling utterly useless. She had imagined herself arriving at the ranch and immediately making herself indispensable, proving her worth through hard work. Instead, she could not even button her own dress. The morning stretched into afternoon. Mrs. Chen brought her lunch, helped her with personal needs that made Olivia want to cry from embarrassment, and then settled her back by the fire with a book. But Olivia could not turn the pages herself, so she simply sat and stared at the flames, wondering what Quinn was doing out there in the cold. He came in just before supper, his face red from the wind and his clothes smelling of horses and hay. He washed up at the kitchen pump and sat down at the table, looking tired. Mrs. Chen served them both a hearty meal of roasted chicken and potatoes, and Olivia had to endure the humiliation of being fed again while Quinn ate in silence across from her. "How were your hands today?" he asked, when Mrs. Chen had cleared the dishes. "They hurt less than yesterday, but I still cannot move my fingers properly." "That is progress, at least." He stood and walked to the fire, warming his hands. "I have been thinking about the wedding. We should probably wait at least 2 weeks, like Doc Harrison said. That way you will be healed enough to sign the marriage certificate yourself." "That makes sense," Olivia agreed, though the delay filled her with a strange anxiety. The longer she stayed here without being married, the more inappropriate it seemed, even with Mrs. Chen as chaperone. Quinn seemed to sense her thoughts. "Your reputation is safe here," he said quietly. "Mrs. Chen is staying in the house, and I have made it clear to my ranch hands that you are my intended bride. No one will question your honor. You have ranch hands. I have not seen anyone else." 2 men. They stay in the bunkhouse near the barn. Tom is an older fellow, been working cattle his whole life. Marcus is younger, about 21, still learning the trade. They are good men, but I will introduce you properly when you are feeling stronger. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Quinn would rise before dawn to tend to the ranch work, come in for breakfast, go back out until supper, then spend the evening by the fire reading or mending tack. Mrs. Chen cared for Olivia with patient efficiency, helping her with everything from dressing to eating to the most personal of needs. And Olivia sat by the fire feeling increasingly desperate to be useful. On the fourth day, Quinn drove her back to Columbus to see Doc Harrison. The doctor removed the bandages carefully and examined her hands with a critical eye. The swelling had gone down considerably, and the color had returned to something closer to normal, though the fingertips were still tender and blistered. "You are healing well," he pronounced. "Another week and you should be able to use them for light tasks. 2 weeks and you will be almost back to normal, though the fingertips may be sensitive to cold for a while." "Can I practice moving them?" Olivia asked. "They feel so stiff." "Gentle exercises, yes, but do not overdo it, and keep using that salve Mrs. Chen is making. It is working better than anything I could have given you." On the ride back to the ranch, Olivia felt more hopeful than she had since arriving. Quinn seemed to sense the change in her mood. "Feeling better?" he asked. "Yes. It helps to know that I am actually healing, not just waiting." He nodded, his eyes on the road. "I know this has not been what you expected. I am sorry about that. It is hardly your fault that the stage got caught in a blizzard." "No, but I am the one who asked you to come here in the middle of winter. I should have suggested you wait until spring." Olivia considered this. "If I had waited until spring, I would still be in Boston living with my aunt. I would rather be here with frostbitten hands than there with perfect ones." Quinn glanced at her with surprise. Was it that bad? She had not told him much about her life in Boston, had kept her letters focused on practical matters. But something about the way he asked, genuinely curious without being intrusive, made her want to be honest. "My aunt is not a cruel woman, but she is not a kind one either. She took me in out of duty when my parents died, and she has never let me forget it. She worked me hard and gave me little in return, not even affection. When she decided I should marry her friend, a man old enough to be my father, I knew I had to leave. Your advertisement was the first real choice I had made in 6 years." Quinn was quiet for a long moment. "I am glad you chose to come here," he said finally, and there was a sincerity in his voice that made Olivia's heart skip. That evening, after Mrs. Chen had helped her prepare for bed, Olivia sat by the window in her room looking out at the dark landscape. She could see lights in the bunkhouse where Tom and Marcus were probably playing cards or reading. The barn was a dark shape against the starlit sky, and beyond it, the emptiness of the plain stretched forever. A soft knock at her door made her turn. "Come in," she called. Quinn entered carrying a wooden tray. On it was a cup of tea and a small plate of cookies. "Mrs. Chen said you might be hungry. She went to bed already, so I brought this up." "Thank you." Olivia watched as he set the tray on her dresser, then hesitated by the door as if uncertain whether to stay or go. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why did you learn to speak Chinese?" Quinn leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed over his chest. "When Mrs. Chen first came to work for me, about a year ago, she knew almost no English. Her husband had been a railroad worker who died in an accident, and she was left alone with no money and no way to communicate. The people in town were not particularly welcoming to her. I needed help at the ranch and she needed work, so I hired her, but we could barely understand each other at first. So you learned her language. I learned enough to get by. It seemed only fair. She was trying to learn English, so I should try to learn Chinese. We taught each other in a way." Olivia found herself smiling. "That was kind of you." "It was practical," Quinn said, but there was a hint of embarrassment in his tone that suggested kindness had been part of it too. "I should let you rest. If you need anything during the night, my room is just down the hall. Do not hesitate to knock." After he left, Olivia sipped her tea and thought about this man she had agreed to marry. He was not what she had expected. His letters had been so formal, so focused on the practical aspects of their arrangement, that she had assumed he was cold or unfeeling. But in person, he was quietly thoughtful, protective without being overbearing, and surprisingly considerate. She found herself looking forward to seeing him at breakfast. The next week passed more quickly. Olivia began doing gentle exercises with her hands, slowly working the stiffness out of her fingers. By the 10th day after her arrival, she could hold a cup by herself, though her grip was weak and uncertain. By the 12th day, she could manage a spoon and fork, freeing her from the embarrassment of being fed. Quinn noticed every small improvement, always with a quiet word of encouragement. He began telling her about the ranch at supper, explaining how he had built it up from almost nothing over the past 5 years. He had started with just 20 acres and a handful of horses, living in a one-room cabin that still stood out by the east pasture. Now he had 200 acres, 40 horses, and a small but growing reputation for breeding good stock. "The railroad is expanding," he explained one evening. "That means more people coming west, which means more demand for horses. If I can keep improving the bloodlines, I can charge premium prices. It is not going to make us rich, but it will be a good life." Olivia liked the way he said, "us," as if her future was already intertwined with his. On the 14th day, she woke to find she could flex her fingers almost normally. They were still a bit stiff, and the tips were tender, but she could grip things, could button her own dress, could brush her own hair. "Mrs. Chen clapped her hands with delight when Olivia came downstairs, having dressed herself, and Quinn's face lit up with a genuine smile that transformed his usually serious expression. "Does this mean I can finally make myself useful?" Olivia asked. "It means you can do whatever you feel comfortable doing," Quinn said. "But do not push too hard too fast." She started small, helping Mrs. Chen with simple kitchen tasks like stirring soup or kneading bread dough. Her hands tired quickly, but it felt wonderful to be doing something productive again. Mrs. Chen was patient with her, showing her how to make Chinese dumplings and teaching her a few words of Chinese in return for English lessons. In the afternoons, when the kitchen work was done, Olivia began exploring the ranch. Quinn had told her she was welcome anywhere, so she bundled up in her warmest clothes and ventured outside. The cold still bothered her hands, making them ache, but she pushed through it. She met Tom first, a grizzled man in his 50s with kind eyes and a tobacco-stained beard. He was mending a fence when she found him, and he straightened up with a respectful nod. "You must be Miss Sinclair," he said. "Quinn told us you would be joining us permanent-like. Welcome to the ranch." "Thank you. Please call me Olivia." "Yes, madam. If you ever need anything, you just holler. Quinn is a good boss, and any wife of his is family to us." Marcus was younger and more talkative, a lanky young man with red hair and freckles who reminded Olivia of boys she had known in Boston. He was exercising one of the horses in the corral when she approached, and he immediately launched into an enthusiastic explanation of the training process. "See, you got to be patient with them," he said, his face animated. "Quinn taught me that. You can break a horse fast if you are rough about it, but you will get an animal that is afraid of you. If you take your time, earn their trust, you get a partner instead of a slave. Makes all the difference." Olivia watched him work, impressed by his gentle competence. "How long have you worked here?" she asked. "About 2 years. I ran away from my old man's farm in Kansas when I was 19. He was a mean drunk, and I figured anywhere was better than there. I wandered around for a while, did odd jobs, got into some trouble." Quinn found me sleeping in his barn one night, and instead of running me off, he offered me work and a place to stay. Said he believed in second chances. That was generous of him. Marcus grinned. Quinn does not talk about it, but he has a soft spot for folks who are down on their luck. That is why he hired Mrs. Chen when nobody else would. That is why he sent for you instead of just staying a bachelor. He does not like seeing people suffer if he can help it. This information settled into Olivia's chest with a warm glow. She was beginning to understand that Quinn Vance was a man whose actions spoke louder than his words, who showed his character through what he did rather than what he said. That evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Quinn asked if she felt ready to set a date for the wedding. "My hands are nearly healed," Olivia said. "I can write my name now and do most normal tasks, whenever you think is appropriate." "What about Sunday? That gives us 5 more days to prepare. We can have Reverend Matthews come out from Columbus to perform the ceremony here at the ranch. Keep it simple, just us, Mrs. Chen, Tom, and Marcus as witnesses." "That sounds perfect." Quinn nodded, but he looked nervous, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. "Olivia, I want to be clear about something. I know we have an arrangement, a practical partnership. But I want you to know that I will never force you into anything. The marriage bed is part of marriage, yes, but only when you are ready. There is no rush." Olivia felt her cheeks heat, but she appreciated his directness. "Thank you for saying that. I confess I have been anxious about that aspect of things." "We barely know each other," Quinn said quietly. "I do not expect you to feel anything for me beyond perhaps mutual respect, but I hope, with time, we might become true partners, maybe even friends." "I would like that," Olivia said, and realized she meant it deeply. She had come here expecting a business arrangement, a marriage of convenience. But in the 2 weeks since her arrival, she had begun to hope for something more. The next 5 days passed in a flurry of preparation. Mrs. Chen cleaned the house from top to bottom and prepared special dishes for the wedding meal. Tom and Marcus scrubbed themselves clean and dug out their best clothes. Quinn rode into Columbus to make arrangements with Reverend Matthews and to purchase a ring. Olivia spent her time sewing a new dress from fabric Mrs. Chen had in her supplies, a simple but elegant design in deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes. Her hands were strong enough now for the fine work, though they still ached after too much use. As she stitched, she thought about the strange turn her life had taken, how she had arrived broken and helpless, and was now on the verge of becoming this good man's wife. On Saturday evening, Quinn asked if she would walk with him. They bundled up against the cold and strolled toward the barn, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the snow-covered landscape glowed with reflected light. "I want to show you something," Quinn said, leading her into the barn. The interior was warm from the body heat of the horses, and it smelled of hay and leather. He led her to a stall at the far end where a beautiful chestnut mare stood. "This is Autumn," Quinn said, running his hand along the horse's neck. "I have been training her for 6 months. She is gentle and steady, perfect for a rider who is still learning. I thought after we are married I could teach you to ride. That way you could explore the ranch on your own, not be trapped in the house all the time." Olivia stepped closer, tentatively reaching out to touch the mare's soft nose. Autumn waffled gently, her dark eyes calm and curious. "She is beautiful, but I have never ridden before." "Are you sure I could learn?" "I am sure. You are braver than you think, Olivia Sinclair. You came all the way from Boston to marry a stranger. Learning to ride a horse will be easy by comparison." She laughed at that, and Quinn smiled, that rare full smile that made him look younger and more carefree. Standing there in the golden light of the barn with the horses moving quietly around them, Olivia felt something shift in her chest. It was not love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something that might become love given time and care. "I have something to tell you," she said impulsively. "I was not entirely honest in my letters. I mean, I did not lie, but I did not tell you everything either." Quinn's expression became cautious. "What did you not tell me?" "Why I really needed to leave Boston. It was not just that my aunt wanted me to marry her friend. It was that she had begun to threaten me, saying if I did not agree, she would throw me out into the street with nothing. I had no money, no skills beyond housework, nowhere to go. I was trapped. Your advertisement was not just an opportunity. It was my only escape." She held her breath, waiting for his reaction. Would he be angry that she had not been fully honest? Would he think less of her for admitting to such desperation? But Quinn just nodded slowly. "I am glad you are telling me now, and I am glad I could offer you that escape. Everyone deserves a choice, Olivia. Everyone deserves a chance to build something better." The relief that flooded through her was so intense it made her dizzy. "Thank you for understanding. We all have our reasons for the choices we make. I am not going to judge you for yours." He hesitated, then said, "I was not entirely forthcoming in my letters either. I told you I wanted a wife for practical reasons, which is true. But I did not tell you that I have been lonely for a long time. This ranch, this life, it is good, but it is empty without someone to share it with. I was starting to think I would spend my whole life alone." "You do not have to be alone anymore," Olivia said softly. Their eyes met in the dim light of the barn, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared vulnerability, of two people who had both been lonely finding unexpected companionship in each other. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold. Mrs. Chen helped Olivia into her new blue dress and braided her hair in an elaborate style, weaving in small white flowers that she had somehow managed to preserve from her garden. When Olivia looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back, with bright eyes and flushed cheeks and an expression of nervous anticipation. Quinn wore his best suit, dark wool that made his broad shoulders look even broader, and he had shaved and gotten a haircut in town the day before. When Olivia came downstairs, his eyes widened and he stood frozen for a moment before finding his voice. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his tone made Olivia's heart flutter. Reverend Matthews arrived at noon, a portly man with a booming voice and a jovial manner. Tom and Marcus had cleaned up nicely and stood awkwardly in the parlor trying not to fidget. Mrs. Chen had set out tea and cookies, and the whole house smelled of the special meal she had been preparing since dawn. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. Olivia and Quinn stood before the reverend and spoke the traditional vows, promising to love and honor each other for as long as they both lived. When Quinn slipped the simple gold band onto Olivia's finger, his hands were steady, but his eyes held an intensity that made her breath catch. And when Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed her gently, a brief press of lips that promised respect and patience. They shared the wedding meal with their small gathering, and Reverend Matthews told stories about the early days of Columbus, when it had been just a handful of tents and desperate prospectors. Tom shared tales of cattle drives he had been on in his youth, and Marcus made everyone laugh with his impression of a particularly ornery horse he had tried to train. Mrs. Chen smiled and nodded, understanding only part of what was said but clearly enjoying the celebration. As the sun began to set, Reverend Matthews departed with promises to see them in church next Sunday, and Tom and Marcus retreated to the bunkhouse. Mrs. Chen finished cleaning up the kitchen, and then tactfully announced that she was retiring early, leaving Olivia and Quinn alone in the parlor. The silence felt heavy with expectation. Olivia knew what was supposed to happen on a wedding night had been given vague and somewhat frightening explanations by her aunt. But Quinn had promised to be patient, had said there was no rush. "I do not expect anything tonight," Quinn said, as if reading her thoughts. "You have been through a lot in the past few weeks. We have all the time in the world." Olivia felt grateful tears prick her eyes. "You are very kind. I am being practical," Quinn said with a slight smile. "A marriage built on mutual respect is stronger than one built on expectations and demands. We will figure this out together, in our own time." They sat by the fire and talked for hours, really talked for the first time since she had arrived. Quinn told her about his childhood on a failing farm in Missouri, how his father had drunk away what little money they had, how his mother had died when he was 15. He had left home at 17 with nothing but the clothes on his back and a determination to build something better. He had worked cattle drives, saved every penny, learned everything he could about horses and ranching. When he finally had enough money, he had come to New Mexico territory and claimed this land, built this life from nothing but sweat and stubbornness. Olivia shared her own story more fully, talking about her parents who had died in a cholera outbreak, about the loneliness of living with an aunt who saw her as a burden, about the dreams she had harbored of someday having a real home and family of her own. "You have a home now," Quinn said quietly. "And someday, if you want, we will have a family too." They were sitting close together on the settee, and Olivia found herself leaning into his warmth. Quinn put his arm around her shoulders, a careful gesture that felt protective rather than possessive. They sat like that until the fire burned low and exhaustion began to claim them both. "I should let you get some rest," Quinn said finally. "We can keep separate rooms for now if that is what you prefer." Olivia considered this. Part of her wanted the safety of her own space, but another part, a growing part, wanted to begin truly building this marriage. "I think," she said slowly, "that married people should share a room. But perhaps we could just sleep beside each other for now, until I am more comfortable." Quinn's eyes searched her face. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." He helped her upstairs and waited in the hallway while she changed into her nightgown, then entered his own room to change. When he knocked softly on her door, Olivia called for him to enter. He wore simple cotton sleeping clothes and carried an extra quilt. "I will stay on my side," he promised. "And if you change your mind at any point, if you want your own room back, you just say the word." They climbed into bed from opposite sides, maintaining a careful distance. The mattress was comfortable, the quilts heavy and warm. Olivia lay staring at the ceiling, acutely aware of Quinn's presence beside her, the sound of his breathing, the warmth radiating from his body. "Good night, wife," he said softly into the darkness. "Good night, husband," Olivia replied, and felt a small thrill at the word. She had expected to lie awake for hours, too nervous to sleep, but the events of the day had exhausted her more than she realized. She drifted off to the sound of Quinn's steady breathing and slept more peacefully than she had in weeks. In the days and weeks that followed, a new rhythm established itself. Olivia took over more of the household duties from Mrs. Chen, learning to cook the meals Quinn liked and keep the house running smoothly. Her hands healed completely, though they remained sensitive to extreme cold, and she became adept at all the tasks required of a ranch wife. Quinn began teaching her to ride as promised, starting with short sessions in the corral and gradually building up to longer rides around the ranch. Autumn proved to be exactly as gentle and patient as Quinn had claimed, and Olivia discovered that she loved the freedom of riding, the wind in her hair and the vast landscape spread out before her. They continued sharing a bed, though Quinn never pushed for more than companionship. He would hold her hand as they fell asleep, or sometimes pull her close in the night, but he always respected the boundaries she set. Olivia found herself growing more comfortable with his presence, more eager for his touch, more curious about what else their marriage could become. One evening in late March, nearly 2 months after their wedding, Olivia found Quinn in the barn checking on a mare who was close to foaling. She had brought him coffee and a sandwich, knowing he would skip supper to stay with the horse. "Thank you," he said, accepting the food gratefully. "She should birth tonight or early tomorrow. I want to be here in case there are complications." "Can I stay with you?" Quinn looked surprised. "It might be a long night, and birthing is not always easy to watch. I want to learn everything about the ranch. That includes the difficult parts." He smiled at that. "All right then. Pull up that stool and I will teach you what to look for." They sat together in the warm barn, talking quietly and watching the mare. Quinn explained the signs of labor, what could go wrong, how to assist if needed. Around midnight, the mare's water broke, and within an hour she was actively laboring. Quinn moved closer, his hands ready to help if necessary, but the mare managed on her own, delivering a perfect black colt that struggled to its feet within minutes. "There now," Quinn said softly, satisfaction in his voice. "That is what we hope for every time." Olivia watched the colt nursing, overcome by the miracle of new life. "It is beautiful." "It is the future," Quinn agreed. "Every foal represents the ranch growing, getting stronger. In a few years, that colt will be trained and sold, and the money will go toward more land, better stock. It all builds on itself." He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the lantern light. "I am glad you are here to see this, Olivia. I am glad you are part of it." Something in his expression made Olivia's heart race. She reached out and took his hand, rough and calloused from hard work, and laced her fingers through his. "I am glad too, gladder than I thought possible when I first arrived." Quinn lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I know we started this marriage as a practical arrangement, but somewhere along the way it has become more than that for me. I do not want to pressure you, but I think you should know. I am falling in love with you, Olivia Vance." Hearing her married name spoken with such tenderness made tears spring to Olivia's eyes. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I did not think I could. I thought I was too practical, too damaged by my past. But you have been so patient, so kind. You make me feel safe and valued." "I love you, Quinn." He pulled her into his arms then, and she went willingly, pressing her face against his chest and breathing in his familiar scent of leather and horses and clean sweat. They held each other in the quiet barn while the mare tended to her new foal, and Olivia felt something settle deep in her soul, a sense of finally being where she belonged. "Can we truly be husband and wife now?" Quinn asked quietly. "In every way." Olivia pulled back to look up at him. "Yes." "I am ready." They left the barn hand in hand and walked through the moonlit night to the house. Mrs. Chen had long since gone to bed and the house was dark and quiet. Upstairs in their bedroom, Quinn lit a lamp and turned to face Olivia. "I will be gentle," he promised. "If anything hurts or frightens you, you tell me and we stop. Understand? I trust you." And she did, completely. He undressed her slowly, his hands reverent on her skin, and she helped him remove his own clothes without embarrassment. They came together in the big bed as husband and wife. And though there was some pain at first, Quinn was true to his word, patient and gentle and careful of her comfort. When it was over, he held her close and stroked her hair, murmuring how much he loved her, how grateful he was that she had come into his life. Olivia fell asleep in his arms, feeling cherished and whole, all the broken pieces of her past finally mended. Spring bloomed across the ranch, bringing new grass and wildflowers and longer days. Olivia threw herself into learning everything she could about running a ranch, working alongside Quinn and the hands to repair fences, tend to the horses, and manage the constant stream of work that ranch life demanded. She grew strong from the physical labor, her body becoming lean and muscled, her skin taking on a healthy tan. In May, a traveling photographer passed through Columbus, and Quinn insisted they have their picture taken. They dressed in their wedding clothes and sat stiffly for the camera, Quinn's hand on Olivia's shoulder and both of them trying not to smile too much. When the photograph was ready a week later, Olivia was surprised by how happy they looked, how right they seemed together. Summer brought a buyer from El Paso who wanted to purchase 6 of Quinn's trained horses at premium prices. The sale brought in enough money to purchase another 40 acres of land adjacent to the ranch, expanding their holdings significantly. Quinn rode out with Olivia to survey their new property, and they made plans for where to build additional corrals and perhaps a second barn. "We are really building something here," Quinn said as they sat on their horses looking out over the land. "This is ours, Olivia. Ours to keep and improve and eventually pass down to our children." "You think we will have children?" Olivia asked. They had been trying since that night in March, but so far nothing had happened. "I think we will have as many as the good Lord sees fit to give us," Quinn said. "And I will love every one of them, just as I love their mother." In August, Olivia missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure before telling Quinn, wanting to be certain before getting his hopes up. When she finally shared the news, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to be parents," he said in wonder. "Olivia, we are going to have a baby, Mrs." Chen was delighted by the news and immediately began knitting tiny clothes and preparing special herbal teas to ease morning sickness. Tom and Marcus offered gruff congratulations and promised to work extra hard to take some of the burden off Olivia. Even the town of Columbus seemed to rejoice, with neighbors stopping by to offer advice and hand-me-down baby items. Doc Harrison confirmed the pregnancy and calculated that the baby would arrive in early April. "That means you conceived right around the end of March or early April," he said with a knowing look. "That is about the time I noticed you two starting to act like a real married couple instead of polite strangers." Olivia blushed, but could not deny it. "We needed time to find each other." "And that is as it should be," Doc Harrison said kindly. "Some of the best marriages start slow and build into something strong. You two have a good foundation." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Olivia had some morning sickness in the early months, but nothing severe, and by her 4th month, she was glowing with health and happiness. Quinn became even more protective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work, but Olivia insisted on maintaining her normal routine as long as she was able. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she told him firmly when he tried to forbid her from riding Autumn. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time while still doing their work." "I know, but I worry," Quinn admitted. "You and this baby are the most important things in my life. I cannot help wanting to protect you." "You can protect me by treating me like a capable adult, not a delicate flower," Olivia said, but she softened it with a kiss. "I promise I will be careful. But I need to feel useful, Quinn. I need to still be part of the ranch." They compromised, with Olivia continuing to do lighter work, but avoiding anything too strenuous. As winter approached and her belly grew rounder, she spent more time in the house helping Mrs. Chen with cooking and sewing tiny clothes for the baby. Quinn converted the small spare room into a nursery, building a beautiful wooden cradle by hand and painting the walls a cheerful yellow. In February, a year after Olivia's arrival in Columbus, Another unexpected blizzard swept through New Mexico. Olivia stood at the window watching the snow fall and thought about that terrible journey on the stagecoach, how cold and frightened and uncertain she had been. She looked down at her hands, which still showed faint scars from the frostbite, permanent reminders of that difficult beginning. Quinn came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her, his hands resting on her swollen belly. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how much has changed in 1 year. When I arrived here, I was half frozen and completely terrified. I did not know if I had made a terrible mistake coming here to marry a stranger. And now I know it was the best decision I ever made. You saved me, Quinn, not just from the cold that day, but from a life of loneliness and desperation. You gave me a home, a purpose, a family. You gave me love." He turned her in his arms and kissed her deeply. "You saved me too," he said against her lips. "I did not even realize how empty my life was until you filled it with warmth and joy and purpose. I love you, Olivia Vance. I will love you until the day I die." The baby arrived on April 8, 1886, after a labor that lasted 14 hours and left Olivia exhausted but exhilarated. Quinn paced the hallway outside the bedroom the entire time, refusing to leave despite Mrs. Chen and Doc Harrison's assurances that everything was progressing normally. When he finally heard the baby's first cry, he burst into the room without waiting for permission. Olivia lay in bed holding a tiny bundle, her face flushed and her hair damp with sweat, but she had never looked more beautiful to Quinn's eyes. "Come meet your son," she said with a tired smile. Quinn approached the bed almost reverently and looked down at the baby in Olivia's arms. He was small and red-faced, with a surprising amount of dark hair and tiny perfect fingers that waved in the air. As Quinn watched, one of those little hands closed around his finger with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Quinn breathed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months without reaching a decision, but now, looking at their son, Olivia knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," she said. "After Tom, who was one of the first people to welcome me here. And his middle name should be Harrison, after the doctor who saved my hands." "Thomas Harrison Vance," Quinn said, testing the name. "It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." The days after Thomas's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Quinn proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to bring the baby to Olivia for feeding, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours just watching his son sleep with an expression of wonder on his face. Tom and Marcus came to visit, bringing carved wooden toys and awkward congratulations. Mrs. Chen helped with the cooking and cleaning so Olivia could focus on recovering and caring for the baby. The whole ranch seemed to celebrate the new addition. As spring turned to summer, Thomas grew chubby and healthy, with his father's gray eyes and his mother's ready smile. Olivia recovered her strength and resumed her work around the ranch, though now with a baby strapped to her back or napping in a basket nearby. She had never been happier, never felt more fulfilled. In July, Quinn surprised her by announcing that he had purchased another 20 acres and hired a third ranch hand to help with the expanding operation. "We are doing well," he told Olivia. "Better than I ever dreamed when I started this place. And it is because of you, because of the family we have built. You inspire me to want more, to do better." "We make a good team," Olivia agreed, leaning against his shoulder as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Thomas slept peacefully in her arms, his tiny hand clutching her finger. "I was thinking," Quinn said carefully, "that maybe we could add on to the house. Build another bedroom or two, expand the kitchen. This family might keep growing and we will need the space." Olivia smiled. "Are you hoping for more children?" "I am hoping for whatever the future brings." "But yes, I would love to have more children with you, brothers and sisters for Thomas, a whole house full of noise and laughter. I would like that too. Over the next several years, their family did indeed grow. A daughter arrived in 1888 whom they named Catherine after Quinn's mother. Another son followed in 1890, named William. And finally, in 1893, twin girls surprised them both, Emma and Grace. The ranch grew along with the family. Quinn's reputation for breeding excellent horses spread throughout New Mexico and into Texas, and he began receiving orders from as far away as California. They built the addition onto the house, added a second barn, and purchased another 100 acres. Tom eventually retired and moved into town, but he remained a frequent visitor and beloved uncle figure to the children. Marcus married a young widow from Columbus and brought his wife Sarah to work at the ranch alongside him. Mrs. Chen stayed on even after the children were old enough that Olivia did not need extra help. She had become family, teaching the children simple Chinese phrases and making special treats that they all loved. When she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1895, the entire family mourned her loss. They buried her in a sunny spot near the eastern pasture where her gardens had flourished. Through it all, Quinn and Olivia's love deepened and matured. They weathered difficult times together, droughts that killed the grass, harsh winters that took some of the stock, the inevitable conflicts and challenges of building a life together. But they also celebrated countless joys, birthdays, and holidays, first steps and first words, the simple pleasure of working side by side toward a common goal. On a cold February evening in 1900, 15 years after Olivia's arrival in Columbus, Quinn found her standing at the bedroom window looking out at the falling snow. She was 43 now, with threads of silver in her brown hair and laugh lines around her eyes. He thought she had never been more beautiful. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, the same question he had asked so many times over the years. Olivia held out her hands, turning them in the lamplight. The scars from the frostbite were barely visible now, faded to faint white lines across her fingertips. "I was thinking about the day I arrived here. How terrified I was, how uncertain, how you warmed my frozen hands between your own." Quinn took her hands in his, the gesture as natural as breathing after all these years. "Best thing I ever did," he said quietly. "You saved more than my hands that day. You saved my whole life, gave me everything I had dreamed of but never believed I could have. A home, a family, a partner who loves me." "We saved each other," Quinn corrected gently. "You think I was not lonely and lost before you came. You think this ranch meant anything when I had no one to share it with. You gave me purpose and joy and 5 beautiful children. You made a house into a home." From down the hall came the sound of the children getting ready for bed, Catherine reading a story to the twins while Thomas and William argued good-naturedly about whose turn it was to bank the fire. Normal family sounds, beautiful in their ordinariness. "I love you, Quinn Vance," Olivia said, the words as true now as the first time she had spoken them in that barn 15 years ago. "I love you too, Olivia Vance," Quinn replied, pulling her into his arms. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days after that." They stood together at the window, watching the snow fall over their land, their home, their life together. Outside, the wind howled and the temperature dropped, but inside they were warm, surrounded by the family they had built and the love that had grown from such unexpected beginnings. Olivia looked down at her hands, still held in Quinn's larger ones, and smiled. Those hands had been broken and frozen when she arrived, unable to grip or hold or do the simplest tasks. But Quinn had warmed them, had brought them back to life with his patient care and gentle strength. And in doing so, he had warmed her heart as well, teaching her what love really meant. The scars remained, permanent reminders of that difficult beginning. But Olivia no longer saw them as marks of suffering. Instead, they were proof of survival, evidence of what could be overcome with patience and care and love. They were a map of her journey from desperate loneliness to profound belonging. In the years that followed, the Vance ranch continued to thrive. Thomas grew into a strong, capable young man who took over more of the day-to-day operations, allowing Quinn to slow down as he entered his 50s. Catherine married a banker from El Paso, but visited often with her own growing family. William became a veterinarian, putting his natural way with animals to professional use while still helping at the ranch. The twins, inseparable as always, both became teachers and opened a small school in Columbus. Quinn and Olivia grew old together, their hair turning white and their steps slowing, but their love never diminishing. They spent their evenings on the porch watching the sunset, their hands still finding each other the way they had that very first day when Quinn had taken her frozen fingers between his own and promised without words that he would take care of her. On a warm spring evening in 1920, 35 years after that fateful February day, Quinn passed away peacefully in his sleep with Olivia beside him. He was 70 years old and had lived a full, rich life surrounded by the family and home he had built. Olivia held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering her love and gratitude for all the years they had shared. She lived another 5 years, long enough to see grandchildren grow up and great-grandchildren be born. She spent her final years in the house Quinn had built, surrounded by memories and love, tended by her devoted children. And when she finally passed away at the age of 68, she was buried beside Quinn on a hill overlooking the ranch, their hands forever joined in the eternal rest they had earned. The ranch remained in the family for generations, passed down from parents to children who understood the value of hard work and enduring love. And sometimes, on cold February nights when the wind howled and the snow fell, those who lived there swore they could feel a warmth in the air, as if two souls were still there, still warming each other against the cold, still finding comfort in each other's presence. The story of the mail-order bride who arrived with frostbitten hands and the cowboy who warmed them became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren as an example of how love can grow from the most unexpected beginnings. It was a reminder that sometimes salvation comes in the form of rough, calloused hands extended in simple kindness, and that the deepest love often starts with the smallest gesture of care. And every generation learned the same lesson that Quinn and Olivia had discovered so long ago. That true partnership is built not on grand romantic gestures, but on daily acts of kindness, on patience during difficult times, on the willingness to warm another's frozen places with the steady heat of your own heart. Their love had started with hands held between hands, warmth shared in the face of bitter cold, and it had grown into something that transcended death itself, living on in the family they created and the land they tended together. The ranch still stands today, a testament to what two people can build when they commit to warming each other through all of life's winters, finding strength in partnership and joy in the simple act of facing the world hand in hand.